Welcome to the Broad Art Tell Me More webinar. We have some exciting authors today. The topic is mystery, and I'm going to hand it over to Etta, who is a librarian. She's a book reviewer, editor, and co-author of First Clue. Etta, welcome. Over to you. You're muted.
Unmute, yes. Sorry about that. I was talking away. Just welcoming everybody. Thanks for joining in today, to the authors and to the folks who've joined in from libraries around the country and maybe the world. I don't know. So I'm going to ask Margot to start and talk about her book. Please, Margot, it's all yours. Oh, Margot, you are also muted. You did the same trick as me.
I'm just learning here on the go. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that. My name is Margot Dewaihe, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here and be unmuted for the moment. And while it's not official, I think I was probably the only kid in Scranton, Pennsylvania, who dressed up as Hercule Poirot for Halloween 3 years in a row. I'm a mystery obsessive. They were certainly one of my very first loves of both storytelling and writing and entertainment. And through just a real desire to be in the world of a whodunit and a mystery, I just started reading more and more. And it led to a love of hard-boiled and noir, specifically that braggadocio and brio of the lone wolf sleuth. And my twin obsession is poetry, and I always looked for a way to merge poetry and a poetic sensibility with that kind of cut to the bone, hard-boiled style. So it led to the creation of my Sister Holiday mystery series, in which I recast the lone wolf, wisecracking sleuth as a hard-boiled, tatted-up nun named Sister Holiday. And I believe that, I don't know, the desire to bring something very fresh to this genre that I absolutely love keeps me thinking very creative and experimentation. Blessed Water is the second book in the series, and it starts with Sister Holiday pulling the dead body of a priest out of the Mississippi River, and it takes off from there. It's a ticking clock mystery with that hard-boiled sensibility, and it takes place in 3 days: Good Friday, Saturday, culminating in Easter Sunday. And yeah, the series was picked up by Gillian Flynn, who's the author of Gone Girl and Sharp Objects, Dark Places. I feel extremely grateful to be published with her, who she's trying to discover new weirdos who bring something to the mystery space, the intersectional feminist mystery space. And yeah, it's just a real pleasure and an honor to share this series with you and to learn more about what you need as librarians, because the sacred space of a library is really important to me. So thank you.
Yeah. Etta, can't hear you.
Etta, you're muted.
I did it again. I'm so sorry. Okay, there won't be a third time's the charm, I promise. I was saying, Margot, Easter's coming up, and it's a good time for folks to pick up the book.
Thank you.
It's a good season. So your book kind of made me laugh in a good way when I was reading it, because I was thinking back to Catholic school in my much younger day, and there was nobody at all like Sister Holiday, to say the least. So can you tell us more about your inspiration for that character?
Absolutely. So again, going back to my sincere love of that particular hard-boiled, wisecracking sleuth who also has a taste for vice, but brings in unusual perspectives. And I, of course, went to Catholic school as well and drew a lot from my experience as a kid sitting there in church and looking at the stained glass and thinking about the crime storytelling that's really in the Bible as well, from Cain and Abel all the way through. I wanted to merge all of that, but give us a sleuth, a 33-year-old iconoclastic, unconventional feminist nun sleuth who embodies that hard-boiled kind of strangeness, but that you want to follow wherever they go, partially because they're a mystery to everyone else around them. They certainly weren't like the nuns that I also had in school, but maybe, you know, this is some wishful thinking. And I'm trying to thread the needle also with mystery and exploring commentary about the state of religion today and violence and also the crime behind the crime. So institutional crimes, as well as the whodunit at the heart of the first book in the series, Scorched Grace, and the second in Blessed Water.
Thank you. And I also wanted to talk about the setting a bit. New Orleans plays a strong role in your book. It's almost another character, I'd say. So how did you go about creating both a strong character in Sister Holiday and a robust sense of place without one stepping on the other?
That's another canonical aspect of mysteries that I love so much, from either Los Angeles of Raymond Chandler or Harlem of Chester Himes. I just love a sense of place in mystery. They can elevate the sense of suspense and unknowability. They can be a Rorschach test for the characters. New Orleans is the perfect place to set a mystery series like this. I mean, I'm surely the 9,000th author that have set a mystery in New Orleans this year alone, but lived there for 2 years after Hurricane Katrina. I was working with Literacy Project for youth who were displaced by the catastrophe. And I just fell in love with it as a place of both blessings and curses. It's a place that's constantly under threat. It mirrored a lot of the main character, Sister Holiday's inner turmoil and resilience and stubborn hope. So New Orleans is its own character in every right, and I hope to do it justice with these books.
You definitely did. Thank you. It was so enjoyable. Well, thank you, Margot. Next, we're going to move on to Jonathan Sandlofer, now that I have not muted myself again. Jonathan, could you tell us about your book, please, The Lost Van Gogh?
Sure. I'll tell you very quickly about me is that I went to art school, and I, much to my parents' unhappiness, and I studied painting, and I came out and I was a kind of really serious painter. Had an unwanted retrospective exhibition in a small museum in Chicago, which collected 10 years of my work from collectors and museums. And my newest 6 paintings, that show opened on a Friday, and the building burned down to the ground on Saturday.
Oh.
And it sent me, I don't know, shall we say, on a little bit of a sort of journey as to why I had become an artist in the first place. And I moved to Rome with my wife and my 8-year-old daughter. I was invited to the American Academy as a painter, and I couldn't paint. So I had been writing for art magazines and things. And I started a novel, which took a long time. It was about a kind of mid-career artist who lost all his work. And when we got back to New York in a year, I read it, and I hated the guy. I just thought he was whiny and entitled and annoying. And so I killed him on the page. And that was really fun. And I realized, so that's what I want to write. And so I ended up writing my first novel, The Death Artist, which was a surprise hit. And then they asked me to do more novels. The Lost Van Gogh is my second historical novel, following The Last Mona Lisa. And it traces what is presumed to be Van Gogh's last self-portrait, which has been missing since his funeral for over 100 years. It was hinted at in a letter. It was described in a letter by his friend, and then it disappeared. So the story alternates between this present-day hunt for this lost painting and tracing what happened to it, moving from not only Van Gogh's studio, but the end of World War II, the French resistance trying to hide the painting, and how it makes its, how it is stolen by the Nazis and ends up in New York. It follows this kind of hunt with my characters, Luc Perrone and Alexis Verde. He's the great grandson of the man who stole the Mona Lisa. She's the daughter of a notorious art thief. So there you go, immediate kismet, right? And they find the painting, or they think they do, and it's almost immediately stolen. And they enlist this kind of frenemy, John Washington Smith, an ex-Interpol agent, and the 3 of them go on the hunt for this painting, they have no idea how dangerous it's going to be, that they go to Amsterdam and to France, and what they don't understand is that they are coming up against contemporary Nazi art dealers. You know, this is true, and the book mixes a lot of true events or fact and fiction, but a lot of fact. Several of the 4 appointed art dealers that Hitler appointed for the Third Reich, their heirs are still selling Nazi looted art on the dark web and on the underground art world. So they come in contact with this, and it's a kind of explosive story, something they never expect to happen, that they put their lives at risk. And I think, you know, for me, I wanted to write, you know, the most exciting thriller possible, but I also felt that this is a book that at its core is a very serious book with a very real and a rather heartbreaking story. I mean, they learn, I'd say that Luke and Alex and Smith learn this profound thing, which is that every stolen painting represents a stolen life. And they, you know, it is not just a hunt for them, but becomes this moral kind of tale.
Thank you. I hadn't heard that story before about your studio burning down.
It wasn't my studio, but it
Oh,
was
the gallery space, right, right.
It was
Yeah.
worse than that. So
Woo.
yeah.
And thanks for telling us about the book. So First Clues review that we did a while back of your book mentioned that you busted some myths that surround the artist. Were those myths killing you, that they're out there? And is it hard to portray someone whom readers think that they know?
Well, you know, this book pulls together a lot of things for me. You know, this obsession I developed with art restitution, the idea that someone can go into a thrift shop and buy a painting for $25 that turns out to be something extraordinary. And Van Gogh, who was, as a boy, my favorite artist and is still, you know, probably the most famous artist in the world in many ways. And I did tremendous research on Van Gogh, aside from reading the 950-page biography of Van Gogh and other books. You know, I went to see where he lived. I went to Arles. I went to Auvers-sur-Oise. I got to stand in his last bedroom, which was like very moving. But what you just asked me, you know, there's a lot invested in the idea of Van Gogh's suicide. And to be honest, I'm not going to ruin anything, but there's really no proof of that. And the book takes on what really happened on the last day of Van Gogh's life. And in the story, actually, Alex is reading a diary to Luke at the end of the book. And I'm not going to tell you what it says, but it is then tossed out or up to the reader to decide what they think. I have my thoughts about it. And, you know, I think that Van Gogh is an extraordinarily interesting artist to many people. I mean, the work is so expressive and it looks like sculpted paint, but his life and the, you know, misery and sadness and ups and downs of his life are extraordinary. I mean, if you realize he lived in that small French town for 70 days, and in 70 days, he made 75 paintings. So more than a painting a day. And that doesn't count the drawings he was doing. So he was in this wildly manic phase and incredibly productive. So, so I do sprinkle throughout the book his story along with this, because as we trace the painting, we get little bits of Vincent's actual story, which I'll tell you, Etta, that this book, not before my final draft, was 750 pages. And I thought, no. It's now 311 pages. And a lot of what I cut was the Van Gogh story. So there's just enough of it, you know, but I got carried away. I was writing things inside of Van Gogh's mind, and, you know, it was a little dangerous too. So.
Well,
Yeah.
it's probably hard not to get carried away.
It was very hard, you know, and I suggest everybody, when you next go to Paris, all of you go to Paris, then take the train for 45 minutes north to Auvers-sur-Oise, the most beautiful town. You'll see where Van Gogh lived, where he painted, where he died. It's incredibly romantic and also exciting to see, you know. I always go where, I mean, that's the great part of research, you know, going somewhere. I want to go actually and work with Margot in New Orleans, which is one of my favorite cities in the world. So, yeah.
Whew, take me with you. It's amazing. I recommend that if anyone takes that France trip, they should bring this book, of course, and as well get a copy of Van Gogh's letters between him and his brother Theo. I have them here in the apartment. And it's very sad, of course, but also it would be a great pairing with this book. And you know, if you can throw in a France trip, God bless.
Yeah, exactly.
So another question for you, Jonathan, on your future plans. So the art world has no end of intrigue between Mona Lisa, now Van Gogh. Can we look forward to something else next? That's an artist-related mystery from you?
Yeah, I'm afraid so. Yeah, the last Mona Lisa was inspired by the actual 1911 theft of the Mona Lisa. And this book by this lost Van Gogh, I'm actually working on 2 books, which is something I've never done before. But I made this deal with my publisher that I would write another Luke book if they let me write another book of something else that I just wanted to do. And then you know, you have to be careful what you wish for. They said, yeah, sure. So I had to give them some of that book. So I started writing this other book, which I'm not going to talk about, but the third Luke book, which is, I don't know if it'll be an ongoing series or if it's a trilogy. I never know, but it deals with, let me say this, a painting that was sold at auction 2 years ago for $220 million, not the Leonardo, which was $450 million and is on the Sheik of whatever's boat. No, but a different contemporary painting that sold for $220 million, which has disappeared, vanished. And so I have a lot of backstory, and Luke and Alex are, this is, you know, can I just say, I don't know, people don't know this, but the last Mona Lisa to me was really about, Luke was the central character. To me, the lost Van Gogh is the Interpol agent, John Washington Smith, because he's the one who really risks his life. And the new book, I think, is Alex's book, because she deserves a book. You know, I feel very close to her. And I think in some ways she's the smartest of the 3 of them. So, and very injured in other ways. So yeah, it's coming. It's coming. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I can barely read 2 books at the same time, never mind write 2.
I'm gonna, part of my brain's gonna blow out my eardrums. So, you know, yeah.
Okay. Now I'm just going to ask our other moderator if Ryan is here to take over from Jonathan. No, I don't think so. Okay, so we're going to move on then to our next lovely author, who is Jessica Bull. Jessica, could you tell us about your book, please?
Sure. So yes, my name's Jess and I'm from London in the UK, and I'm an enormous Jane Austen fan. So lots of the things that Jonathan was saying about going to Van Gogh's home really resonated with me, because I've spent many years kind of retracing Jane Austen's steps all over England and trying to get a sense of who she was and how she lived. So my book is the first in a new series of mysteries, and it's called Miss Austen Investigates the Hapless Milliner, and it starts in 1795 in Hampshire with a very young Jane Austen. So she's only 19. She's not quite the wise, mature author of Pride and Prejudice that you know and love. She's more of the exuberant, youthful author of Lady Susan, and she's trying to enjoy a secret assignation with a very charming young man at a ball. But unfortunately, their romance is interrupted by the discovery of a dead body. And Jane wants to solve the mystery, firstly because she knew and respected the victim. So she was a milliner and Jane bought a bonnet from her. And then her brother, her gentle brother Georgie, is arrested in connection with the crime. And if Jane doesn't find the true culprit, then Georgie will be hanged for somebody else's misdeed. So I wrote it because I'm an enormous Jane Austen fan and I wanted to get close to her and understand her, but also because I think we sometimes conflate her with her characters and think that she was perhaps a little bit more wealthy and more privileged than she was. And in actual fact, she really struggled to get into print. And it's amazing that she was able to leave us her legacy because, you know, she struggled with all sorts of things from not having a permanent home to write, and ill health and dejection and publishing rejections. And I found all those things hugely inspiring on my writing journey. So I really wanted to share that and hopefully inspire others. And it's really lovely to talk to you as librarians about it. Firstly, because I'm a former librarian. So I started my career in the public library service here in London. And it was through libraries that I discovered my love of mysteries, because I think I'd been focused on the classics. But practically on my first day, I walked into the library and there was this huge wall just devoted to mysteries. And all of my borrowers kept coming up to the counter with like stacks of mystery books that they'd get through so quickly. So I started talking to them about, what is this? Why are you reading so much kind of crime and mystery? And got so many recommendations that I fell in love with murder mysteries myself. And then secondly, because Jane Austen was a big fan of libraries. So her formal education was finished by the time she was about 12, but she educated herself by reading, and she was able to do that by joining circulating libraries and book societies wherever she went. So therefore, when I was writing Miss Austen Investigates, and I really wanted to make the things that Jane Austen did in real life central to her solving the crime. So one of the things that happens is that she finds a book that the murder victim has left behind, and there's a book plate in there that leads her to a library, and she gets to talk to a real librarian, a librarian who was inspired by a real librarian, Mrs. Martin, and she finds out, you know, what the murder victim had been reading, because she reasons that you can tell a lot about somebody from what they read, and therefore how they might have died.
Thank you. I actually was one of the people who thought that Jane Austen came from a bit of money. Maybe it's a modern prejudice, because you think that someone who's able to stay home writing has some means.
Yeah, I mean, I think her family wanted you to think that. So after she died, so she was a clergyman's daughter, and clergymen were kind of always on the fringes of the gentry. So they just had to rely on the living that they could raise. And the Austens were very kind of sharp-elbowed. So two of her brothers went off into the Navy and made their own fortunes. And one of them, her brother Edward, was adopted by their incredibly wealthy cousins. So that's how she was kind of introduced to the world of like Pride and Prejudice, and how she's able to write about that with such knowledge, was because she had this insight to that wealthy world, but she was always the kind of the poor relation and the outsider. And it was only towards the end of her life, so she died very young, she died when she was only 41, and she'd written a lot of her stories. By the time she was 23, she'd written the first drafts of Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, and Northanger Abbey, but she didn't publish until her late 30s. And part of that was because her father decided to give up their home, and she lost that leisure time and that private space to write, because she was always moving from home to home, looking after her brother's children and doing the housework and all that work that women did, which they didn't it was kind of a big collusion to make it look like they were ladies of leisure and weren't working behind the scenes. And it was only at the end of her life, when she lived in that little cottage in Chawton, when the kind of female community rallied around her. So her mum and her sister and a friend that they lived with, and they took over the housework and said, okay, Jane, this is your time, you focus on writing. So yeah, that was a deliberate story that the Austens told, was that she was, very genteel and she only wrote for pleasure and she had no ambition to write for money. But no, if you look at her letters, which were a big inspiration for Miss Austen Investigates, she definitely wanted to earn money.
I see. Okay. And when I was reading the book, it really struck me how Jane Austen's life and work still says so much to us now. Was her timelessness part of the appeal to you in writing her as a detective or a sleuth?
Absolutely. So her characters are so universal, and you can see that because there are so many retellings. So she's been kind of retold in so many different settings, not just in time wise, but in different cultures and different communities as well. So she really speaks across time and place, Austen. And the other thing that was wonderful about her characters and her stories to inspire a mystery is that all of her heroines are essentially sleuths. So every Jane Austen story is basically a mystery where the heroine has got to find out the true characters of those around her, especially the hero, and all the stakes kind of hinge on that. So if you think about in Northanger Abbey, Catherine Morland even goes as far as to accuse General Tilney of murder.
Mhm.
True. Okay. Yeah. I had not thought about that. Also, can you tell us about the process of creating a writing voice that's reminiscent of Jane Austen's, but that is more accessible to today's readers?
Yeah, absolutely. So the big inspiration for me was Jane Austen's letters. We've only got about 161. We think that there were about 3,000 that she wrote in her lifetime, but her sister basically destroyed most of them shortly after Jane died. And that was because she's so candid in her letters, and she can be quite wickedly funny, which means they're just kind of gold dust for us now to read them. So the letters are really kind of succinct, and were a big inspiration for the kind of pared back, honest Jane Austen's voice that comes through in Miss Austen Investigates, I hope. And then the other thing that I think I really tried to do as a historical novelist was, I mean, you can tell I'm so enthusiastic about Jane Austen. I want to tell you everything that I know about her. But in the novel, I really tried to pare myself back and just tell you what you needed to know in terms of the history in her life in order to understand this story. And also, I really focused on a particular moment in time of Austen's story. So I mentioned it's part of a series, and I planned the series out before I started writing so that I wasn't tempted to try and tell you everything that I want you to know in this one book.
Okay, we'll wait. Thank you, Jess. And now I'm going to move to Stephen. Stephen, could you tell us about your book, please?
Sure. Yes. Thank you. First of all, thanks to all of the librarians listening. I really appreciate your support over the years. I've done a number of other series, and I always love to meet, talk to, and support librarians. When I was a little boy, my uncle would always tell us stories, and it really got me interested in the idea of telling stories and becoming a storyteller. And at our library, we had something called the Paperback Book Exchange when I was a kid. And you would bring a paperback book, and you could take any one that you wanted and keep it for as long as you wanted. And so I remember one summer I just read mystery after mystery. And I would just, by buying one book, I could buy a paperback book and just exchange it every week and just read the entire summer. So I fell in love with mysteries and suspense as well. And I did a series of books called the Bowers Files, which is 11 books. It's a police procedural about an FBI agent, Patrick Bowers. And this is a new series, though. Fatal Domain is the second in the Travis Brock series. Broker of Lies came out last year. And one of the things I kept thinking is there a unique type of hero that we hadn't really seen before? Like, I love the intersection of mystery and suspense. Like, I love both of them, and I love seeing them come together. And so in the suspense world, we've had FBI agents and CIA agents or CIA operatives and Homeland operatives, just all of these. I was like, is there anyone else? And so anyway, the main character, Travis Brock of Fatal Domain and Broker of Lies, is a redactor. So he works in the basement of the Pentagon, and he's the guy with the black marker. And so whenever there's a Freedom of Information Act request that comes through, he's the guy who pours through all of our top secret programs and decides what can and cannot be released to the public. And so he has an eidetic memory. So he's the one person who knows all of our secrets. And I thought that's a fascinating character. Like, I've never seen a redactor before. And it sort of opens up this whole world of intelligence and espionage that we really haven't seen before. And so in this, which is the follow-up, as I mentioned, to Broker of Lies, in this, he and a couple of his associates have to stop a conspiracy that has to do with a pharmaceutical firm And so also solve a mystery and stop what ends up becoming a domestic type terrorist attack. And so as I mentioned, mysteries to me are the most fun when something big is at stake. So I always like stories where there is suspense as well. And so in Fatal Domain, there's a lot at stake by the end of the story. So yeah, so thanks for your support over the years, and thanks. I hope that you'll enjoy this new series featuring Travis Brock.
Thank you. I didn't catch the name of your previous series. Maybe the listeners didn't either. Can you tell us again what that
Sure.
was?
Yes, it's the Bowers Files. It's Patrick Bowers is an 11-book series that I did, and the pawn, the rook, the knight, the king, queen, bishop, checkmate, opening moves, that series. And most people kind of know me for that series. And so yeah, thanks for asking. That one is I think the last one that series came out about 4 or 5 years ago, called Every Wicked Man.
Thank you. And sorry about that. I just had to close my window because the neighbor's dog, but I'm back. So thank you. I heartily recommend that people go back to that previous series as well as this new book. Stephen will keep you on the edge of your seat. So just to talk about the current book again, Fatal Domain, it's an espionage novel that moves readers around the world. Can you tell us about writing scenes in Uganda, for example? What's your research process for getting to know those places and get them on the page?
As much as possible, I like to be present at the scenes that I write. Now, in the case of a couple of the scenes that I did that have to do with Uganda, South Sudan, and I wasn't able to be in the refugee settlements there for that, but I did contact a writer from the area who was able to consult with me. I mean, one of the things I really try to do is to write authentic mysteries. Maybe the best fan letter I ever got was from someone who read The Rook, my Patrick Bowers novel, and he said, when I read your books, he said, I've been a detective for 17 years, and when I read your books, I feel like I'm at a crime scene again. And so to me, that's the biggest compliment. It's like, I want the authenticity for this world of defense, espionage, spies, and mystery, as well as police procedurals. And so it is a lot of research. I visited the Pentagon twice for Fatal Domain. I've toured the FBI Academy a number of times just to try and make sure that the information is as accurate as I possibly can get it. And of course, there's a lot of imagination woven right into the facts that anyone can look up.
Thank you. And you've mentioned all these books. I think you're the author on the panel with the most works under your belt. So if there's anyone listening among the librarians out there who are thinking of writing a book, is there any one piece of advice you'd give to aspiring authors?
Well, that's a good question. So I am an organic writer. I don't outline or plot anything out. And I feel like I'm a big proponent of doing that. And so for me, I really feel like what drives a story forward is pursuit. So some people will say, well, you need 3 acts, a beginning, middle, end, first act, second act, third act, like that. And I understand where people are coming from. That's a temporal understanding of story, which is fine. But I don't love to approach things that way with people who are aspiring authors, because it gives you the idea that a story is about a progression of events instead of a collision of desires. So stories are not just about happenings. This happened, then this happened, and this happened. Stories always revolve around pursuit. And so I always tell people, let your character's pursuit be what opens the story up to you, instead of trying to tell them what it should be. So I like to encourage folks to say, not just what would the character do, but what would this character do if I got out of the way? Then get out of the way and let them act without restraint. And if you do that, I feel like the characters will have a depth and honesty that they wouldn't have otherwise.
Thank you. I love that collision of desires phrase. Great novel title if anyone wants it. So one of our authors didn't make it today, so we have a little more time. And I'm going to put you on the spot to go back and ask you for maybe a 2-minute answer on what did you want to tell us about your book that we didn't have time for before. So I'll go in the same order. order, and that means that Margot, you are in the hot seat first.
Certainly, and just what a pleasure to hear about all of your books and your processes. It really is such a delight, and I hope to get to see some of you if you attend the BoucherCon Mystery Conference or any of the others. I'm relatively new on the scene. I was writing poetry for 15 years in absolute obscurity, so I'm a bit new to this space, and I just absolutely adore it and feel like I'm really home. I've landed home. And I would say one thing you might have picked up from just the eccentric description of the book and the series, it's a quartet. And the last two books of the quartet have been announced, which is great for 2025 and 2026. Just need to write the two of them. And then I just want to say that I really value humor, and I write crime fiction. It can get dark, very dark. It can get really hard, very painful. I believe in catharsis, but I really value humor. I love dark humor. I love gallows humor. The ability to crack a joke when things are really rough is something I value, and that's absolutely drenched in the book. And I center that as ways of kind of the armor that keeps people a little bit distant, but also a way of survival. And so I kind of study humor in the book as well in a strange way as I pair it with criminality and transgression, and loss, grief. So yeah, that's something I would add.
Thank you, Margot. Jonathan, it's all yours.
Oh, also, well, I want to reiterate that it was great hearing all of you. Thank you. And I do want to thank librarians. Does it count that my wife was a librarian? That may be somewhat proof that I love librarians. Couple of things. I mean, I'm just reacting to things people said. I loved Stephen's talking about this propulsive pursuit, which is exactly the way I think about my books, as a character-driven pursuit with an engine behind it that is constantly moving you forward. I also do not outline at all, and I outline as I'm going along in some ways to see what's coming next, but I can't outline ahead of time because I think I don't know what's going to happen so often, and I feel like if I outlined it and I get rid of my own excitement, will there be the excitement on the page? So I love the excitement of seeing things happen, unexpected things happening. For me, that's really sort of extraordinary. I just did a one-day workshop at the Key West studios in Key West, where I was, by the way, I have no voice from like a 5-week book tour. Many of them were in libraries, I have to say, which are always so great because they're the best organized of any of them. But you know, I had them talk about, you know, what moves a story forward, and we talked about what separates literary fiction from crime fiction, which is always a kind of stepchild of it, which I sometimes challenge some of my literary writer friends to see if they can write a crime fiction novel, because I think it's very difficult. It has a narrow spine that you have to keep coming back to. You have to answer certain questions. So I don't know. I mean, I think I should say that a couple of the things in the book that people ask me about. So there's a kind of Nazi art looting hunter in the book, a woman who I just love. Somebody asked me who I wanted to spend time with in my book, which character. And I said, this new character I invented, because there are such people. They're called Flutgott hunters, and they search out stolen art. There are over 100,000 paintings, artworks, stolen by the Nazis that are still missing. And you may or may not know that the Nazis stole 1/3 of the art of Europe. That's like phenomenal. They went into countries with a list of the collectors they were targeting. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty horrifying when you read about it, because it is the most systematic art plunder and murder. I should say, in reaction to you know, what Margot said, I also love humor. I wasn't setting out a book that would be filled with laughs. You know, in my acknowledgments, I thank Billy Wilder, the old Hollywood screenwriter and director, because I watched an extraordinary documentary with him. I love his movies, you know, The 7-Year Itch, The Apartment, Some Like It Hot. He made a lot of movies. He was from Berlin, but a Viennese Jew, went to Paris, so he missed the war, went to Hollywood, became a famous and successful writer, director, was hired by the US Army to film the liberation of the concentration camps. And when he showed that film in Berlin at the end of the war, half the audience left and the half that stayed were speechless. He couldn't get them to say anything about the movie. And so he said, I learned something. Then I went back to Hollywood and I made a Nazi rom-com. He made a movie called A Foreign Affair, where Marlene Dietrich's boyfriend is either Goebbels or Göring, but it's a light comedy, sort of dramedy. And he said, what I learned was that the tougher the material, the more you'd better make them laugh. And I wasn't trying to make people laugh in this book, but I certainly was trying to entertain, because I think that's the way you get important and tough subject matter through to people in a tough, they don't even notice because it's speeding past them. So for me, that was, so I thank Billy, because I never met him, because he is an extraordinary artist in his own right, who was speaking to me sort of directly in this book. So I have other things I wanted to talk to everybody here. I want to get together, have a drink. I want to talk to, Jessica about Jane Austen and her letters versus the over 2,000 Van Gogh letters, So if you bring that book with you, you're carrying a tome. Keep it on your phone. Anyhow, somebody else, please.
Well, it's a date. We'll meet you in France.
Good idea.
Jess, could you tell us a bit more?
Sure. So I was meant to tell you that this is my debut novel. So I've got a long way to go before I catch up with Stephen and some of the other panelists. And then I'll tell you 2 things that you probably don't know about Jane Austen that really inspired this novel. So when I was looking to make it authentic, I was looking at crimes that might have touched her life and that feature in her books. And the big one that touched her life was that she had an aunt who was arrested and tried for shoplifting. So a very wealthy aunt who was found in Bath in 1799 with some lace. So she'd been into a haberdashery and bought some white lace. And then when they searched her, she had some black lace in there as well. And the lace was worth about 60 shillings. And in Georgian England, anything over 1 shilling was an automatic capital crime, so she could have faced the death penalty. But because of the relatively low value of that lace, she probably would have been commuted to, that sentence probably would have been commuted to transportation to Australia, which could have been a death sentence in itself. And the second thing was that I really wanted to show kind of how diverse Jane Austen's life was compared to the kind of version of her films that you might see in the big splashy Hollywood adaptations. So she had a brother who she had lots of brothers, and she had one particular brother, Georgie, who had learning difficulties and epilepsy, who is often written out of her story by historians because it didn't meet this perfect family narrative. But the evidence from looking at the letters of her mum and dad really shows how much they loved him and they cared for him. And at a time when people who had difficulties were often consigned to asylums, they made sure he was cared for and looked after all of his life. So there's a particular letter from Mr. Austen when he's reflecting on Georgie's condition, where he says, "We have this consolation, he cannot be a bad or wicked child." So I had this moment where I realized, well, what if I took this with the terrible imagination of a novelist? What if I took this really beloved and vulnerable member of the Austen family and put him in the position that Mrs. Lee Perrot was in, where there was a real chance he was going to be hung for a crime? Then would that be enough to make my young, passionate Jane Austen go out and solve a mystery? So yeah.
Thank you. Georgie is a very affecting character. He really will stay with me.
He deserves to be remembered, I think.
Yes. Thank you. And Stephen, could I ask you to be the last on the hot seat?
Sure. So one of the things that I love about stories is a twist. And so, as I mentioned, I write organically, obviously without a plot outline. And so at the end of Broker of Lies, which is the book preceding Fatal Domain, there's a huge twist on the last paragraph. And so when I was writing that book, I kept thinking, okay, I'm just going to just set myself up. Like I just introduced all these bad guys and stuff. Then I sat down to write the second book, Fatal Domain. I was like, what have I done? Like, how do I get rid of all these villains? It's like, so when I sat down to start writing it, I had no idea that the ending for Fatal Domain would be what it ends up being. And one of the things that I always love to do is ask big questions in my stories. And so in Fatal Domain, I mentioned a little bit about a pharmaceutical conspiracy. And so the question is, what if you had a drug that could help people who had dementia and maybe even help the rest of the population have a higher IQ? And a pharmaceutical firm is going to basically only sell it to the richest people. They're only going to make it available to them. And so then this sort of domestic this, I would say, terrorist group decides that they're going to try and steal the formula and post it online for anyone in the world to have, so that the haves and have-nots can be equalized, and you will not have the disparity between the rich and the poor like that, and wealth disparity and so on. So our heroes have to stop them. So it's like, well, you're like, well, they kind of have a good point. Like, we don't want disparity. We want to help people around the world. But then you're also like, well, we can't steal from pharmaceutical firms and pass the funds. So anyway, I love moral dilemmas and twists. And so they kind of find their way into this story, just as they do into all of my books.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very intriguing. I want that drug. Or I'd settle for just getting enough sleep, which would, help in the same direction. Well, thank you very much to all the authors for coming on. Before we go, I would like to push my own thing, which is not a book, but it's a weekly newsletter that comes out on Thursdays. And it's about crime fiction. It's called First Clue, and it's at First Clue Reviews. It's free. So thanks again to everyone for coming, and to the librarians who attended. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for your publishers that help sponsor the webinar. All your books are available through Grodart, and excited to have you on the panel and to be reading your books. Thank you.
Thanks for the chance to be here.
Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.